Wait, what? My voice rang out across the dining room, echoing off the rich mahogany walls. You're making Luca the CEO? I glanced around the table, my gaze darting from face to face, hoping for someone, anyone, to crack a smile, to reveal this was just some kind of joke. But instead, my parents stared at me with stone-cold expressions, and my brother Luca sat there, grinning like he'd just hit the lottery. In a twisted way, he had. Sweetheart, Elena sighed, her tone thick with exhaustion. Luca has the leadership qualities for this. You're too stiff, too serious. Marco nodded in agreement, as if that settled everything. You're great with numbers, Isabella, but you don't inspire people the way Luca does. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Luca? Inspiring? This was the guy who'd never held a real job in his life, who preferred partying over working, the one who had burned through his trust fund twice and had to crawl back home for more. This was the man they were putting in charge of our family's business, the company our grandfather had built from the ground up, with his own hands. But I've been working at Anderson Home Goods for years, I protested, my voice rising. I helped restructure our supply chain. I negotiated contracts. You're a good worker, Marco cut me off. But Luca's a natural leader. You should be happy for him. Luca leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head, looking entirely too pleased with himself. Yeah, Isa, don't take it so personally. You can still be involved just, in a support role. The words hit me like a slap to the face. A support role? After everything I had poured into this company, late nights, early mornings, crunching numbers, while my so-called leader brother partied his way through his 20s? I turned to my mother, hoping she might throw me a lifeline. Elena, please. She simply patted my hand, the way you might soothe a child. Sweetheart, maybe you should focus on something else. Start a little side business of your own. Something inside me snapped. You want me to start my own business? My voice dropped, dangerously calm. Fine, but don't come crawling to me when Luca runs this place into the ground. Luca snorted and waved me off. Relax, sis, I got this. I stood up so fast my chair nearly toppled over. Without another word, I stormed out of that dining room, out of the house, and out of their lives. Or so I thought. Years later, they'd come knocking on my door, and this time, I'd be the one holding the reins. Walking away from that house felt like ripping off a bandage, but instead of relief, all I felt was raw, simmering rage. Not the kind that makes you shout or break things. No, this was the kind that settles deep in your bones. The kind that drives you through every late night, every early morning, every ounce of effort you pour into proving everyone wrong. I had spent my entire life playing by their rules, walking the path they laid out for me. I worked tirelessly for the family business, only to be tossed aside like a forgotten piece of trash. And for what? So Luca could swoop in, take credit for my hard work, and pretend like he had any clue what he was doing. Fine. If they thought I was only good enough for a side business, then I'd build one so successful they'd choke on their own words. I spent weeks brainstorming, jotting down ideas in my journal, researching markets. What could I create that was truly mine? Then it came to me. Over the years, I'd studied supply chains, product sourcing, and customer trends. I knew what worked and what didn't. I had seen firsthand the rise of eco-friendly, affordable, high-quality home products, a market my family's outdated company had completely ignored. They still clung to their old-school wholesalers, never bothering to adapt to the new wave of direct-to-consumer e-commerce. What if I started my own brand? A home goods line focused on sustainability, affordability, and modern design, not the cheap, mass-produced junk my parents' company carried, but something new. A brand that could make homes beautiful without emptying people's wallets. There was just one problem. I was broke. Unlike Luca, I didn't have a trust fund or wealthy parents eager to throw money at me. Everything I had was from scraping together my savings. I took a deep breath and did the scariest thing I'd ever done. I cashed out my retirement fund. It wasn't much, just enough to cover my first round of product samples and a small batch of inventory. I worked tirelessly, day and night, designing my first collection, minimalist, high-quality, eco-friendly home essentials. The factory in Vietnam agreed to produce my designs in small batches, and I found a reliable logistics partner. I built my website from scratch, taught myself digital marketing, and launched an online store. And then I waited. I should have known my family wouldn't back me. When I casually mentioned my idea at a cousin's wedding, Luca practically choked on his champagne. "Wait, hold on," he said, trying not to laugh. "You're selling what? Bamboo cutting boards and organic dish towels online?" Elena shook her head with a look of pity. "Isabella, honey, I know you're upset about the business, but this just isn't realistic." Marco sighed deeply. "We have connections, sweetheart. If you really wanted to start a business, you should have come to us. But e-commerce? It's too unstable. That's why we stick to traditional retail." I clenched my jaw tight. "You mean the same retail business you just handed over to Luca?" Luca rolled his eyes, dismissing me. "Whatever. Look, I hope it works out for you, Isa, but let's be honest. You don't have the experience to make this work." I let them laugh, let them dismiss me, because deep down, I knew something they didn't. I knew they were trapped in the past, and that was something I could use to my advantage. I knew that while they scoffed at online businesses, the world was quietly shifting beneath their feet. I understood that the very thing they mocked was about to turn everything upside down. The first month was brutal. My ads barely converted, website traffic was dismal, and orders trickled in one at a time, just enough to keep me from panicking. I packed every box myself, handwrote thank you notes, and obsessively tracked customer feedback. And then, it happened. One night, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. A social media influencer with 2 million followers had posted about my brand. She had ordered one of my products, loved it, and raved about it to her audience. By morning, I had 5,000 new orders. My heart raced as I stared at the screen. This was it. For the next 2 weeks, I barely slept, scrambling to fulfill orders, managing the flood of emails, and trying to keep up with the sudden surge in interest. Every cent I made went right back into inventory. I hired a fulfillment company and scaled my operations faster than I ever imagined. 3 months later, my little side business had racked up its first $1 million in sales. Meanwhile, just as I had predicted, Luca's company was falling apart. Luca had always been smooth-talking and confident, able to convince anyone that he had everything under control, even when he had no clue. But there's one thing that charm can't fix: numbers. And numbers don't lie. The first sign of trouble at Anderson Home Goods came sooner than expected. At first, it was just whispers from old coworkers, complaints about delayed shipments, unhappy suppliers, and confused leadership. Employees were frustrated. Luca had big ideas, but zero follow-through. He wanted the company to be trendy, but instead of modernizing operations, he wasted a fortune on expensive marketing campaigns that made no sense. Then came the price hikes. Luca, desperate to increase revenue without improving the business, raised prices on everything, and I mean everything. Even the cheapest, most basic products suddenly cost 40% more. Customers noticed, and sales plummeted. The company tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Their reputation was tanking. I should have felt sympathy, right? I should have felt bad watching my family's legacy unravel because they put their trust in the wrong person. But all I felt was satisfaction. Because while Luca's business crumbled, mine was exploding. After my brand went viral, things moved fast. I reinvested every dollar, expanding my product line, improving supply chains, and locking in better deals with manufacturers. I built a loyal customer base through word of mouth and authentic marketing. Unlike Luca, I understood how to read the market, not just throw money at flashy ads. 6 months in, I hit $5 million in sales. By the end of the year, it was $12 million. I wasn't just running a business anymore, I was building an empire. And then came the phone call. I was in my office, going through new partnership proposals, when my phone buzzed. It was Marco. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the best of me. "Isabella," Marco's voice was tight and controlled. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, smirking. "Oh? About what?" There was a long pause before he sighed. "It's about the company. We're struggling." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch out. He cleared his throat. "Luca's having some difficulties. The market has changed and I cut him off. No, Marco, the market didn't change. You put an incompetent CEO in charge. More silence. Then, quietly, he added, "We need your help." There it was. The moment I never thought I'd hear. The man who once told me Luca was a natural leader, now begging me to fix his mistake. I should have hung up right then and there, but instead I smiled. A cruel, delicious smile, because an idea had just formed. The next morning, I called for a meeting, but not at my father's failing office. No, I wanted them to see just how far I had come. So, I had them meet me at my corporate headquarters. When my parents and Luca arrived, their expressions were priceless. My office was everything Anderson Home Goods wasn't: sleek, modern, and thriving. Employees bustled with purpose, and every inch of the place radiated success. Elena looked around, stunned. "Wow, Isabella, this is impressive." Marco cleared his throat. "Yes, very impressive, but let's get to the point." Luca, though, was sulking. His arms were crossed, jaw clenched, refusing to make eye contact. I took my time, savoring the moment. Finally, I said, "Let me get this straight. You're asking me, the daughter you dismissed, the one whose business you mocked, to come fix your mess?" Marco hesitated. "Well, when you put it that way." "That is the way it is," I snapped. Luca rolled his eyes. "Look, just name your price. We need you to bring the company back on its feet." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, Luca, you don't get it, do you?" I leaned forward. "I don't need your company. I built my own, and guess what? It's bigger than yours ever was." Luca's face turned red. "That's not true." I pulled out my phone, opening my financial dashboard. I turned the screen toward them. $12,340,000 in revenue. Elena gasped. Marco paled. "Luca?" He looked like he might puke. "That's impossible," he muttered. I grinned. "It's not just possible, Luca. It's my reality." Marco exhaled sharply. "Isabella, please. We're running out of time. The bank is threatening to seize assets." I tapped my chin, pretending to think. "All right, I'll help." Their faces lit up. But then I continued. "On one condition." They leaned in. "You work for me." Luca frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled sweetly. "You need jobs, don't you? Well, I have openings. You can work here, but not as executives." I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You can start as unpaid interns." The silence that followed was deafening. Luca shot up, furious. "You've got to be joking." I shrugged. "Take it or leave it." Elena glanced at Marco, her expression desperate. Luca's jaw tightened in a silent fury. They had no choice. "Fine," Marco finally muttered, his voice shaky with shame. I stood up, extending my hand. "Welcome to your new reality. Hope you enjoy fetching coffee." The first day of their internship was pure gold. Luca, my parents' so-called golden child, their hand-picked CEO, stood in front of me in my office, wearing a cheap button-up shirt that clearly hadn't seen an iron in years. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by a glare at the floor, his arms crossed like a sulking teenager. My father, once so proud and authoritative, stood stiffly beside him. And Elena, who had spent her life convinced Luca could do no wrong, looked as if she might faint. I let the silence linger, letting them feel the full weight of what they had become. Finally, I spoke, leaning back in my chair. "Let's talk about your new responsibilities." Luca scoffed. "This is humiliating. You're doing this just to mess with us." I smirked. "No, Luca. I'm doing this because it's exactly what you deserve. But hey, if you'd rather be unemployed, there's the door." His jaw clenched, nostrils flaring. He hated every second of it, and that made it even sweeter. Marco cleared his throat, forcing a strained smile. "Isabella, honey, let's be reasonable. Surely there's a better use of our skills than menial work." I arched an eyebrow. "Skills? You mean the ones that ran your business into the ground?" A flicker of shame crossed Marco's face, but he remained silent. "All right then," I continued, picking up a sheet of paper. "Here are your assignments." I handed each of them a printout. Luca scanned his and immediately turned crimson. "You want me to organize the warehouse?" he sputtered. I nodded. unbothered. That's right. We just expanded, and I need someone to do inventory checks. Since you're such a natural leader, I'm sure you can handle it. Luca looked like he was about to throw the paper at me, but Elena cut in. What about us? She asked, her voice hesitant. I smiled sweetly. Elena, I put you in customer service. Her eyes widened in horror. Customer service? Yep, I said, my smile widening. You'll be handling all incoming complaints. Customers will be calling, emailing, and leaving reviews all day long. Your job is to make sure they're happy. She looked physically ill at the thought. And Marco, I said, turning to him, you'll be handling supplier relations. You'll be responsible for cold calling manufacturers, negotiating rates, and making sure we don't run into delays. Marco blinked, clearly processing. You want me to call suppliers? That's grunt work. I grinned. Exactly. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. Let's be honest. If Luca had succeeded, you wouldn't be here right now. You'd still be patting him on the back, calling him a genius, and looking down on me like I was nothing. Marco opened his mouth to argue, but then hesitated, because deep down, he knew I was right. I stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the skyline of my success, the office buildings, the streets bustling with people carrying shopping bags, some of which contained products from my brand. I had built something real, something that mattered. Meanwhile, my parents had lost everything by betting on the wrong person. Turning back to them, I said quietly, You know what hurts the most? Elena blinked, swallowing hard. What? It's not the fact that you chose Luca. It's not even that you didn't believe in me. I exhaled sharply. It's the fact that when I walked away, you didn't care. Their faces fell. You didn't call. You didn't check in. You didn't even ask how I was doing. You just dismissed me like I was an afterthought. A heavy silence settled between us. I could see it now in their eyes, the guilt, the realization that they had burned this bridge long before I ever set it on fire. Marco rubbed his temples. We thought you'd come back, that you'd fail and realize you needed us. I let out a bitter laugh. Wow, that says everything, doesn't it? Elena's voice wavered. Isabella, we never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you? I asked, my voice quiet. Her lips parted, but no answer came, because there wasn't one. I walked back to my desk and picked up a small stack of papers. Since you're looking for another chance, let me make you an offer, I said, tossing the papers in front of them. They hesitated before picking them up. Marco's brows furrowed as he read. What is this? He asked. I smiled. A severance package. You resign from my company permanently, and in return, I'll give you a generous one-time payout. No more struggles. Elena's face twisted in shock. You're paying us to leave? That's right, I said smoothly. Because I don't trust you, and I don't want you involved in my business. Marco's grip on the papers tightened. This is insulting. I leaned forward, my voice hard. No, Marco. What was insulting was spending my whole life being treated like I wasn't good enough for you. Elena's eyes watered. Is this really what you want? I met her gaze, unwavering. It's what I need. Marco clenched his jaw and stared down at the papers for a long moment. Finally, he let out a slow breath. Fine, he muttered. We'll take it. Elena's lips trembled, but she nodded. If this is what will make you happy, sweetheart, then we'll go. A pang of something, almost like sadness, hit me. This was the final goodbye. But I didn't stop them. I was done waiting for them to love me the way I deserved. They signed the papers, stood up, gave me one last lingering look, and left. I watched from my office window as they walked out of my building, out of my life. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I felt free. I stayed in my office long after they had left, the signed severance agreement lying on my desk. It was over. For so many years, I had yearned for their approval, their recognition. I wanted them to see me, to finally acknowledge that I was worth something. But now, I understood something far more important. I didn't need them. I had built my empire on my own, without their help. I had succeeded despite them, not because of them. And in that realization, I found the most satisfying victory of all. In the weeks that followed, everything settled into a new rhythm. Luca vanished. No surprise there. The last I heard, he was jumping from one failed startup idea to another, still chasing quick money instead of committing to real work. My parents moved out of state, cashed in my severance package, and bought a smaller house somewhere quiet, far from the city. After that, they faded from my life, and honestly, I was okay with it. I was finally free of the burden of their expectations. No more waiting for their approval, no more trying to prove my worth. No more second-guessing if I was enough. Because now, I knew I was. With my family out of the picture, I immersed myself in my company more than ever before. The best part? I didn't have to do it alone. Unlike my parents' company, where employees were treated as disposable, I surrounded myself with people who truly mattered. Ava, my logistics manager, had started as a warehouse assistant and worked her way up. Nina, my head of customer service, had been turned down by countless companies before I gave her a shot. I surrounded myself with individuals who believed in the vision, who knew that success wasn't about lineage, it was about hard work, integrity, and the willingness to adapt. And because of that, we didn't just grow, we thrived. A year later, I stood in a grand ballroom, the applause echoing all around me. My company had just been named the fastest-growing e-commerce brand of the year. I took the stage, accepting the award with steady hands. When I turned to the microphone, I inhaled deeply. A few years ago, I was told I wasn't leadership material, that I was too rigid, too serious, that I didn't have what it took to succeed. A murmur ran through the crowd. I smiled. I'm standing here today because I refuse to accept that. The applause grew louder. Success isn't about luck. It's not about charm. It's not about being born into the right family. I paused, letting my words sink in. Success is about persistence. It's about refusing to let others define you. It's about knowing your worth, even when no one else sees it. The applause erupted into a standing ovation. I stepped back, my heart racing. This was the moment I had always dreamed of, not their approval, not their validation, but standing here on my own terms. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's succeeding without them.